Autoimmunity, does it all start in the gut? I'm Dr. Martin Rutherford, certified functional medicine practitioner, chiropractor.
Dr. Randall Gates, board certified chiropractic neurologist, also a chiropractor.
We're doing a mini series here on autoimmunity. It's an exploding topic. It's an exploding situation that's occurring in our country, and apparently, as far as we can tell now, outside of our country, from people that we see that come here from outside of the country. It's something that we become conversant with. For those of you who've never seen us before, Dr. Gates and I have melted two separate disciplines together, functional neurology as well as functional medicine. Last week we did a topic on is it all stress? Is it from chronic fight-flight, post-traumatic stress syndrome? Dr. Gates presented some of the literature on that. This week we're doing, is it all gut? So we're not confused. We're not having a confusing moment here. But in the end, we married these two disciplines because ultimately of those two questions and more, okay, where we started out seeing fibromyalgia patients. And I don't think at that point in time that people realized that fibromyalgia was autoimmune. Mm-hmm. And it was in fact, we're in Reno, Nevada, and about 35 minutes from here is the gentleman who determined that Epstein-Barr virus caused chronic fatigue, which during the 80s and 90s was very closely related to fibromyalgia, if anybody even believed that a person had it. And so we started out doing fibromyalgia. We realized that there were multiple components to it. We realized that some of those components were neurological. We realized that some of those components were not. Were like the gut and viruses, and some people were delving into heavy metals and this whole thing. And we spent a long time treating people, trial and error, and then we started to realize that fibromyalgia was autoimmune. That other conditions were autoimmune. That Lyme disease is actually an autoimmune problem. You can watch our videos on that. And then we played back and forth with how much of it's autoimmune and how much of it is stress, and which do you treat first, and how do you do it, and so on and so forth. And then started to realize that the gut was a big player. This is before probiotics and 70% of the immune system is in the gut deal came out. And so we've had a long time we spent a long time looking at these varying aspects that you've all probably been exposed to at this point in time, and managed to get what we feel is a pretty good understanding of how to go about these autoimmune problems, because it turns out that pretty much everybody walks in here with just about anything they walk in with has an autoimmune problem. And if you have something that comes and won't go away, kind of came out of nowhere and won't go away. For example, people get migraines and then they go away and they never get them again. Okay, the people who walk in here, the people who get migraines, they come in here, they never go away. And it's the same way with certain pains, and it's the same way with certain gut problems, and it's the same way with many of the conditions, dizziness, vertigo, bounce, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, those types of things. So one of the reasons they don't go away, maybe the biggest reason, last week we argued for the chronic stress response, maybe the biggest reason is autoimmunity. And we got to see a lot of autoimmunity through trial and error. We got to see that in a lot of these people that we had already kind of established in our minds that they had autoimmune problems do very well after we addressed their gut. Mm-hmm. And we spent a lot of time, Dr. Gates spent a lot of time researching the gut. And at some point we decided, you know what, we got to do the gut first. At some point we decided we had to do the gut and the stress responses. But at some point we decided we had to do the gut first. We started seeing significant jumps in improvement quicker as being one of the moving parts in pretty much all the autoimmunity that we were treating. And so that became a center of focus in your world as far as the research that you were doing. And so we're going to bring you some of that today. So, and I will often tell people, I have a feeling that sometime in the near future, maybe in the next couple of years, that some research project or some authoritative group is going to come out and say, I think all autoimmunity is coming from the gut. I think it's possible, but you've done the research. You would be more conversant with that, but it just seems every month or a couple of months something else comes out that's coming from some bacteria or virus in the gut combined with leaky gut or not or whatever.
Right.
So so that's kind of where we're going today. Last week we made a strong argument for chronic stress responses, and frankly I don't think there's any doubt that both of them are involved. But it's kind of like which came first, the chicken or the egg, and these types of things. And then we're going to continue to do some presentations on this in the near future. So,
yeah, and going back to what you were saying, we saw the autoimmune disease was based in the gut. These were our observations 6-7 years ago, and this was a time before. Well, let's say it this way: this was a time when, if we mentioned gluten-free, that came against so much stigma. People scoffed at it. At that time, we were doing autoimmune paleo. And again, nobody had heard of it hardly at all at that point. And
well, even when we started doing criticism.
This, yeah, exactly.
3 years ago, we started this, right? It'll be 3 years ago, I think, next week or 2 weeks from now. And all we heard was, all you guys talk about is the gut. And we're like, yeah, right.
But then now fast forward
so pay attention.
End of 2017, going into 2018, everybody's focused on the gut. Everybody who walks in here typically has already been on autoimmune paleo. They've tried probiotics, they've tried this GI supplement, they've tried this doctor's leaky gut formula, yet they're still not having results. And we'll dovetail into that. But what you need to know as an autoimmune disease patient, just to kind of summarize some of our other broadcasts, is that there's a tremendous association between so many autoimmune diseases and the gastrointestinal tract, leaky gut. You can go back and watch our broadcast on that. I think most people watching this will have some familiarity with leaky gut. But just conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, they're finding that bacteria from the intestines are translocating into the joints. That is causing the specific autoimmune response associated with rheumatoid arthritis. We know that Sjogren's syndrome, that's a condition where the immune system attacks the lacrimal and submandibular glands, basically your ability to make saliva as well as your ability to make tears. They have a high association with H. pylori, which is a bacteria in their stomach. We also know thyroid, the most common autoimmune disease in America, has tremendous associations with food molecules, so intolerances to gluten, intolerances to dairy, multiple sclerosis. The gut breaks down within 7 days if you injected the reactive T cells from an MS patient or an MS mouse into another MS, a non-MS mouse. That little mouse will have breakdown of their gut in 7 days and breakdown of their blood-brain barrier in 14 days. It's now unequivocal that there's an association between type 1 diabetes and bacteria in the gut and autoimmunity. I mean, we just keep going on and on. You name the condition and the research is there. So it's pretty overwhelming and pretty significant, basically. And when you look at the amount of money spent in this country on autoimmune disease, it is staggering. We didn't even go into Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, where it's just like complete slam dunk, leaky gut, bacterial imbalances, largely with Klebsiella and Crohn's disease. Yeah, you can go into celiac. With ulcerative colitis, there's breakdown of the intestinal barrier and colonic barrier integrity, on and on and on and on. And these are, again, conditions that lots of times require $30,000 a year of medications, if not more, to manage them. And so
autistic spectrum
diseases. Yeah, World Journal of Gastroenterology,
which, by the way, are largely autoimmune related also.
Yeah, World Journal of Gastroenterology did a great overview of that in 2013, 2014, I believe, where they said autism is a gut problem. That's basically what they were saying. They said that the American Pediatric Association was turning a blind eye to it, and that there was tremendous research as to why these autistic patients were having problems, and it was all based here.
And for those of you who are out there going, "No, it's vaccinations," there's actually maybe a little connection.
There might be, but we don't want to talk about that.
No, I'm just saying. I'm not saying all vaccinations cause. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we've seen a number of autistic kids who became autistic after they had a vaccination. I don't think that's like controversial.
Right.
Okay, but they're kind of already a compromised host of the gut.
Yeah, lots of times parents will relay Joey or whoever their name was were on antibiotics several times.
Antibiotics is more the thing that sets them up.
Could be.
And other things that set them up. Compromise their gut, then they get the shot.
Right. So
some people,
all these
we're not
factors-
saying, you know,
we're not saying
we're not the
vaccinations cause
vaccination
autism.
guys, okay?
Right.
But we're just saying, for those of you who are looking, saying, no, autism is vaccinations. Whenever I hear it's all heavy metals, it's all, I'm always suspect. We have always found it isn't that way, but we have always found that there is some, and even the vaccination people can see that there's some problems in a small percentage of the people. Okay, and I understand. But anyways, I'm just saying that this autoimmune stuff in the gut is.
It's huge. It's huge. And then the question becomes, why is the gut breaking down? Which gets into environmental factors. That's what everybody chalks up to in the literature, environmental factors. Well, what does that really boil down to? Is it the fact that we're eating more processed carbohydrates and starchy foods, high fat, high sugar, starchy foods, pre-made meals? I just read an article on that this morning regarding autoimmune disease. So is it the fact that we have these TV dinners and things of that nature that we're feeding ourselves as we grew up? Is that what's causing autoimmune disease? Is it the antibiotics like we've talked about? Is it the change in the food supply, so to speak, in America, where we now have big agriculture and different pesticides are used, and are those pesticides imbalancing our gut flora, depleting us of certain vitamins and cofactors and nutrients? Or is it the stress? Or is it a combination thereof? And realistically, it's probably a combination thereof. Very strongly, we are seeing the stress response as being the driving factor for a lot of patients who have persistent gastrointestinal dysfunction, frankly, because we saw it. We were treating a lot of autoimmune patients just with nutritional and supplementation protocols.
Well.
Yeah, and they would maybe do well in the beginning, but then they would fall apart because they were massively stressed out or they had post-traumatic stress disorder, and those things were not being addressed that were further compromising their physiology. So we definitely look at the stress in detail. Some new research, because we promised you that we would go into that in today's broadcast, is they're now finding there are nitric oxide pathways that can be dysfunctional. So for any of you autoimmune patients who have cold hands and feet, and let's say you don't have Raynaud syndrome, but you have cold hands and feet, that's a breakdown in the nitrosative pathways, or nitric oxide pathways as they're termed. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator. You may have heard of it for people who have heart conditions. They give them nitric oxide derivatives. So anyways, when individuals have autoimmune disease, they can get an imbalance in their immune system. And like an evil dictator can take over their immune system. It's called Th17. It's a very inflammatory part of the immune system. And when that gets rolling, the nitric oxide pathways tend to become dysfunctional. And as a result of that, blood vessels, your distal arterioles going into the capillaries, those distal arterioles start to break down. So you don't get enough blood flow into the extremities. And that can cause the cold hands and the feet. But what they're finding, that's just a representation of the problem. What they're finding is that once this starts to occur, glutathione is the body's most powerful antioxidant. It helps to balance the immune system. But once we have this dysfunction of the nitric oxide pathways, glutathione gets all consumed and it becomes kind of inert or inactive. And with that happening, then your glutathione is not able to then try and balance your immune system. So it's kind of like, the evil dictator takes out the warships. So now there's nobody to really police them. And that's a major, major finding that's coming about with autoimmune disease in general. There's a lot of research on this. Again, more and more research just with every condition. Diabetes, we talked about Sjogren's last week. Now Sjogren's is tied also to a bacterial imbalance in the gut. It just keeps going and going and going. It's not a theory anymore. It's a well-accepted element. A lot of this research is being done at Harvard and these major medical schools on the microbiome, but everybody is looking for the probiotic. Oh, in fact, there's a great article. They did a recent study on lupus nephritis. To lupus, another autoimmune condition tied to leaky gut. They gave mice with lupus nephritis probiotics, and they found that their lupus kidney disease went away when they were on probiotics. It's pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. So everybody out there now is hawking probiotics. They're hawking their probiotic, that this bacteria is better than that bacteria. Unfortunately, we really don't have enough research yet to say that.
But I'm starting to see articles that are kind of getting a little bit more realistic about probiotics, talking about when it makes the person worse and why, and when it doesn't work and why, and when it works and why. And it's getting down to, it certainly works for some people, but frankly, more often than not, it doesn't do anything, but the person has been is taking it. It's not making them any worse. So they keep taking it because somebody said, it's like going to the dentist. Somebody says you should be taking it, but I am starting to see articles on that where people are kind of just saying, look, you got like 14 different strains of probiotics or something like that they manufacture, and there's like 10,000 bacteria in your gut. And the other articles that are starting to argue for, if you can get the gut under control, you can get the stress response under control. But that's me saying that. But if you can get the gut under control, your gut will repopulate itself the way it's supposed to. The key is getting that gut under control, which is no small thing.
And when you look at the electron microscope images of the gastrointestinal bacteria, it's kind of like Nazi Germany in there. And so you have a lot of inflammatory bacteria, and just because you're going to sprinkle some probiotics in there doesn't mean those bacteria are going to plant seed and start taking over. So frequently the inflammatory bacteria, they're entrenched in the intestines.
Right. Or they get like a covering on them.
Right.
Sometimes that the probiotic can't even get in there.
And so because of that, then the only way to really change this microbial structure is to, in our experience, change someone's diet to, in essence, try and starve these inflammatory bacteria of what they like to eat. Then you can use other natural microbial regulators is probably the best way to term them. You can kind of think of them as antibiotics, but they're not antibiotics. They help to kind of wipe out some of the bad guys and kind of clear the landscape. So then, as Dr. Rutherford is saying, hopefully the good guys can start to grow back in, kind of getting rid of the weeds and attempt to get the good guys in there. But then within the context of all that, you have to consider then other factors that are promoting leaky gut. Are you eating certain foods? Because, for example, gluten causes leaky gut in everybody. Whether you have celiac disease, a gluten sensitivity, or you have absolutely no health problems at all, gluten breaks down the gut. So you're taking your probiotics, you're eating your French bread, that's an exercise in futility, basically.
Or to go back to what we talked about last week. I mean, to me, the biggest X factor is the chronic stress response. And that's what we talked about last week. We have people coming in here all the time now, as Dr. Gates said, and I do the intakes, and it used to be, we had mentioned diet, like diet's going to help me. Like now it's like it's like everybody's on the AI.
Just diet.
Now everybody's on the autoimmune paleo diet, as he said, and what are they doing here? Right. And they're taking bags of supplements, and they've been the people who've done very similar things to what we would do with the intestines in their particular case, and then it worked and then it didn't work. So what are you going to do? Well, in the beginning, I said we had two professions that were put together here, and the functional neurologist had figured out how to dampen chronic fight-flight responses. And it turns out that what we started to see was, we needed to do the gut first. But if we didn't do the fight-flight responses at the same time, then the brain was flooding the whole system with stress hormones, and it has a particular affinity for the inside lining of the gut. Well, if you're trying to fix an intestine, and it's continually getting flooded with stress hormones that are inflaming it and damaging it and causing leaky gut, that's going to be the big X factor. And this is kind of like the little back and forth between, is it the brain? Is it the gut? We'll probably talk a little bit more about antibiotics in the future and things of that nature.
Heavy metals, I think we need to talk about heavy metals again as it pertains to autoimmune disease.
Talk about heavy metals again. Yeah. So
I'm glad you brought that up today.
So the gut but the point of this, so when I said the gut, it's no small thing getting somebody's intestines better. I mean, it is no small thing. We get some really, obviously there are people out there who have taken probiotics and going, it worked for me, and it did work for you. We don't see you. We don't see the person it worked for, okay?
Yeah, we're not seeing the people where AIP works for them anymore.
Right, we see the people that have done everything now. It went from nobody understood anything, nobody understood what the gut problem was, nobody even thought the gut was a problem. People thought we were ridiculous taking them off of gluten. They thought we were more ridiculous saying that that a gut had something to do with their chronic joint pains. And we went from that 10 years ago to this now, to where everybody's come in and they've done all that stuff. And they have all the data, and they've tried it. I had one patient came in yesterday, and she had a book from a medical intuitive, And the book is like, it's all over everything. I told her, I said, I think this gentleman must be watching our videos, but it has all of the pieces in there with no chance of this person getting better reading this book, because each chapter has like here's 15 supplements for your brain, and here's 20 supplements for your gut. And it's not like that. And it's not like that. And you have to be able to evaluate what is affecting that person's gut.
Completely.
And there are way more factors than what Dr. Gates just got done saying about. So you have to determine the factors first. You have to, if the stress response is there, and there's some literature now that's calling irritable bowel syndrome, irritable brain syndrome. Dr. Gates has done presentations on how concussions break down the gut almost immediately in some cases. Now I mentioned that to everybody, and everybody, lady yesterday, oh yeah, I've had multiple concussions. So there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. But having said that, I do believe right now that at some point everything is coming out. Here goes back to your probiotic commercials. 70% of the immune system is in the gut. So why would it be a surprise that immune responses in the gut were the center of, or way in the front line of creating autoimmune responses? I mean, it wouldn't be, just from a logical perspective, it would be logical. We see it every day. Look, that's all we treat as autoimmune stuff now. I mean, it is a rare day when somebody comes in and talks to me and they don't have either an established autoimmune problem or they suspect they have an autoimmune problem. And it's just like so easy again, because back years ago, it was like, I think you got an autoimmune problem. Oh, you guys think everything's autoimmune. It's like, we're just telling you what we see.
And also relative to diet. So everybody talks about AIP now. Well,
autoimmune diet.
You have to find the right diet for the individual. Case in point, we have this patient been to the Mayo Clinic, we discovered with our testing that she has, or he has, or they have, I don't want to be gender specific, because I don't want to, just think that we're talking about patients, but just using this individual as an isolated example, they have a condition where their immune system is attacking the stomach. This person has had a lot of stomach issues throughout the past. So we determined that this individual has an immune attack on their stomach, yet they're continuing to have all sorts of digestive symptoms. And this individual had to be broken down in terms of their diet into basically just eating protein and fat, no veggies, no carbohydrates. And then all of a sudden, the gastrointestinal pain went away. Well, that's pretty drastic. And a lot of you are not going to know to do that, not going to do it anyways. But you have to find the right diet for the right individual. Completely the right diet for the right individual. And that is so important in the context of everything else that we've discussed in terms of stress and bacteria and all these things. And just more and more, I mean, I forgot to even mention autoimmune hepatitis. It's a condition out there where the immune system attacks the liver.
What he just talked about was autoimmune gastritis.
Yeah, where the immune system attacks the liver. Well, we're finding that it has a tremendous association with gut bacteria coming from the gut and going into the liver, inflaming the liver. The liver can't tolerate all the inflammation, so it actually turns on itself and causes the immune system to attack it. Almost invariably, every autoimmune disease we've managed, maybe with the exception of a couple. We haven't seen a Behçet's syndrome yet, but we've managed a lot of these autoimmune cases this way. So,
yeah, and if somebody else has a successful approach, then we tip our hat to them, like know what it is. But this is kind of what we've come up with. It's been pretty consistently successful, so we're just sharing this with you. Okay, again, we got over 600 hours of this stuff, and there's no hook at the end of this, nothing like that. It's just that when I started out in this years and years and years ago, it was 25 million people were considered to have chronic pain in this country, of which we're finding out if you have chronic pain, maybe it's not autoimmune, but there's a high percentage of chronic pain that is autoimmune, a high percentage. And now they're saying that chronic pain is going to be 50% of the American population by 2020. So even though all this data is out there, even though there's a zillion functional medicine practitioners out there, there is not a zillion chiropractic neurologists, functional chiropractic neurologists out there. Even though there are a zillion people online saying, do my brain program, and I always poke them and I see what they look like. Even though there's the new book on, or the book on the, by the medical intuitive, giving you all of this data and so on and so forth. it's still exploding because you just have to really know that where to start. And our last two videos are arguing, if you have a chronic fight-flight response, it is a good chance it may be damaging your gut. And if you have an autoimmune problem, the literature is saying there's a good chance it's coming from your gut. That's kind of a good place to start. And then there's about 1,000 other nuances. But some people who are going to be maybe not a 10 on the scale of gut problems and brain problems, maybe you do some of these things and that you read about and for your brain, and maybe you do the AAP diet, maybe feel better because you don't have that much damage. If there's people out there doing that, and I think that there are, we don't see them. We see the people who have literally done everything at this point in time, from countries all over the world and people all over the United States, and it's getting worse. And it's getting worse. So that's why we share these things with you, to kind of get the thoughts going in your head, maybe do a little more research. Certainly, you know.
Just one last thing on that fight-flight thing, because again, so many, and you hit this big time in the consultation, so many people say, well, I'm not stressed. I'm not stressed.
I had two yesterday.
But we're finding that many of you are stressed. And when we actually start talking about it, you've been exposed to trauma earlier in life. Actually, your life is stressful, but you know, we're forced as Americans to be stoic, to not talk about it. And what I hear from a lot of individuals is, yeah, I try to meditate, but I can't shut off my mind. If you can't shut off your mind, then you probably have some racing thoughts. Yeah. And lots of times those racing thoughts are driving stress patterns because you're thinking about getting to work, you're thinking about doing this, you're thinking about doing that,
can't
thinking about
this
sleep, problem, thinking about that problem.
Back to sleep.
Exactly. Read the book Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And my now late mentor, one of the last things I heard him say, he said, unless you're a yogi in India meditating 8 hours a day, you have leaky gut.
Because the stress response breaks down the gut.
Because the stress response breaks down the gut.
And if you're living in America, you probably have a stress response.
Yeah, so that pretty much covers it. Yeah.
Okay. So that was it for today. Kind of just making another point where, again, we have so much data on these very topics already all over our website. So if you're interested, I would defer you to those. And we're just trying to draw a clear picture, as clear a picture as can be drawn in your head if you're watching this mini series on autoimmune, as to what you're really dealing with, to give you a better opportunity. I mean, you can contact us, but a lot of people are not here, can't get here, not convenient to get here, whatever it is. So it gives you, kind of arms you with data to be able to investigate yourself, or go to your practitioners and say, here's what I think, and what about investigating this, and so on and so forth. So good luck with this data, and we hope that it's helpful to you.